So it can be a bit of it is a thing we've talked about sometimes. So both Björn and me, we played a lot with each other before, and we are sort of comfortable doing these sorts of things. This thing can be a bit sort of almost douchey sometimes, where you go, I set a scene, and you're there, and I start and say, all right, so you call me here, and you said you have something very important to tell me. What is it? And then I sort of put you on the spot and make up something cool now, right?
Right.
So, but
no, I agree that if you are happy with each other and familiar with each other's range of expression, that can be worthwhile. But agreed to say if we are playing I imagine the idiom is widely known. If we are playing hot potato, then that's not so much fun, right?
Yeah, exactly. But here, the explicit point is also to challenge each other and to grow, right, as players.
So what have we seen with new people coming in and participating? And I can anticipate if this has gone on for this time and you're still excited about it, then I imagine the outcomes have largely been positive. But what have you learned from people who were new to this? Right? People who came in and started to participate. What did they bring to this that for you was illuminating in any case?
All right, that's a difficult question. So there hasn't been as much rotation in the group as I had hoped for, but there have absolutely been a number of people who are new to it. Now, most people who come in are people who I have played with before, or who are sort of in playing this kind of thing, right? One thing that I have discovered is how different things are the difficulty of doing different things varies a lot between people. So something that I find very easy and trivial to do is a challenge to someone else, and sometimes something that they do without even thinking. I go, oh my God, how did you do that? Right? So, for example, last time, last week's game, so we do this once every 2 weeks, and then sometimes we skip if there's not enough people who want to do it. So last week's game, the theme was playing in first or third person, right? That was what we were exploring. And I have written a game. You have played a bit of it, right? Nerves of Steel. Yes, Nerver av Stål in Swedish. And it has so in that game you play it is a film noir game, and all the narration in the game is in film noir voiceover monologue, right? So it's all past tense, first person. Yeah, exactly. And so we played a lot with it in this game as well, and it was quite clear because we played a bit with tense as well. We had a flashback which we did in past tense. And what I discovered was that for one of the players, it was really challenging to talk in third person, right? He kept sort of tripping up and talking in first person without thinking because it was so natural for him. And as we talked about it later, he said that he sort of dressed himself mentally in the character and then just described what he was doing. And interestingly, for another player, he had problems talking in first person. Because he was used to talking in third person, and he'd been doing that a lot. And for me, who wrote the game where you explore a lot of this, and I've had a lot of practice with it, and partially probably because I don't visualize as I play. Like, role-playing game is very verbal for me. It is just language. It is not mental images. So for me, I jump between these without problems, right? If I go, I want to do this, I want to play in first person now, I can do that without it. It's not a mental load for me. So it is that part of talking about skills and role playing, because it's not really. I don't think it's not something I guess I have trained it by playing in different versions, so to speak. But it is it was interesting to discover how the same thing can be very easy for someone and difficult for another one. And in this case, the very opposite
Right.
with first and third
Mhm.
person.
There is a game called Puppet Land from the mid 90s that has an interesting technique where the players speak only in first person and in present tense. I jump over the, over the candle. Everybody's playing puppets. And then the game master speaks only in third person and past tense. She
Right.
jumped over the candle might be the response. But then this
Yeah.
happened or something like that. And it is quite effective in lots of ways because I have generally found that unless there is a formal construction, like in Puppet Land or in something that you are doing here, first of all, a formal construction can be very constructive, right? Very, very positive or very shaping for the experience. But let's say there is no such formal construction of usage. Then I have found in a lot of cases that it actually makes no difference. And that a
Yeah.
person
Yeah.
can be very deeply invested in their character and seeing it through their character's eyes and very intuitive in what the character is doing and still use the third person. It's not indicative of their engagement, right? And so, since it's not necessarily indicative, that suddenly means that we have design space for making it take shape when we want in different ways, right? And
Yeah.
so there's no intrinsic thing that is created by doing it one way or another unless you formalize it,
Yeah.
right? And
And
that's cool. It's like
there is
raw
another
material, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there is another really interesting phenomenon that I have discovered as I've been playing games that have rules for how you speak,
Mm-hmm.
and that is sort of the thing. The phenomenon. There is a name for this, but I don't know it. Where if you run an experiment and you change a variable, it will improve the results no matter what you're doing, right? You change the lighting in the office and productivity increase, these kinds of things, because people know that they are part of an experiment and they are being
Right.
sort of
Mm-hmm.
measured. So I find the same sort of thing happens in role-playing game where if you set a rule, no matter what rule, but if you set a rule for how you are allowed to speak, you are forced to think about what you say,
Right.
and
Right.
you automatically start working with language as a tool
Right.
in a different way than you might if you're not thinking about it at all and just
Right.
speaking your
One of
mind.
the classes that I have not yet taught, I came up with 3 classes to teach, and then I realized I didn't want to teach any of them unless there was an introductory class as a prerequisite. So I made that. And I ended up with the introductory class and 4 classes. One of them that I really would like to play or like to do one of these days examines the game The Pool quite carefully and its various derivatives and its informal derivatives and the lessons that have proliferated out through this hobby since. And one of the most important aspects was this rule for speaking and the choice whether to do it or not that is part of the game. And then if you look at games that came just afterward, people took those and either reversed them or distributed them slightly differently. And the impact of those choices on those games was immense, absolutely immense. And so there is a way, with all techniques, there is a way for them to become too fiddly, over mannered, and ineffective. And the equivalent can be found in many combat systems. There is a way for what is actually a pretty understandable way to conduct a combat that's full of fun and activity, and then it becomes too fiddly, too overmannered, too frozen in place to place, and kind of the design got away from itself because it just becomes too focused on more and more and more subroutines. The same thing can happen for rules for speaking, right? Where the rules for speaking start to become kind of onerous and kind of
Yeah,
ineffective,
absolutely.
right? And so, with understanding that it's the same phenomenon, whether we are talking about numbers and sword swings or whether we are talking about whether you whether you narrate the success or the failure, and then you get to add one element of backstory or God knows what, right? All these things. And so um, that's where I think techniques like you're talking about, or this mode of interaction, this club that you are talking about, is wonderfully effective for people. And it's also nice because it's no pressure, right? It's just one evening,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You're not
exactly.
you're not
Exactly.
resolving.
Yeah.
This is not a
Yeah.
resolution at the UN or something like that,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And it is, and this is also a very important thing that was important for me from the start. It is a game,
Right.
and we play a game, we play a story, and it's supposed to be fun and
Right.
play a game, right? It's not a fucking workshop, right? It's not.
Exactly.
We don't do a bunch of exercises
Right.
and practice these things.
Right.
No, we work on these, we think about these things, and then we make a story of it. We make a game.
And
right?
a person can walk away with it with as much or as little benefit happened this time, and that's okay.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
one other point about it not being a workshop, because most of the time when people are doing this, they are unfortunately too project oriented. There is a game in design, right?
Yeah.
And it's project oriented. We have to make progress on the project. And
Yeah, this is just
right,
exploring.
right. And now some of us actually like that somewhat project oriented approach just as a framing device, but it gets out of hand very quickly, right? It gets out
Yeah.
of control and becomes a takeover issue for people, that we are working on a thing. And I find it quite liberating. I mean, one thing that I'm also teaching a lot about is let's not worry about the project. Let's certainly not worry about publishing. Let's not even worry about the manuscript and the best way to explain it. Forget all that. When we are working on design, we are working on design. And it's okay to, change direction. It's okay to, to relax about it.
Yeah.
And if you don't have those more relaxed and enjoyable experiences, your game design is going to be terrible anyway.
Yeah.
So it's very wonderful, to hear about this.